I may have committed many sins in my life, but stealing money from the people and from the government is not one of them. You know, when I proclaimed martial law, I didn't proclaim martial law alone. It is made to appear as if I just signed the decree and said, I impose martial law on each and every one of you. No. I asked the legislature to please pass a law proclaiming martial law because there was anarchy in the country. Now, let me say this. The opposition was strong. And they were members of the Security Council, and somehow they had adopted a resolution which required that there be a unanimous vote for the armed forces to be able to move. And therefore the armed forces was immobilized. At the same time, I asked the opposition party to come and join me in a coalition government. I offered one half of the cabinet. And of course they laughed at me and said, why should we join you? We're going to take over the government. By the time you are through with the exercise, you're dead, politically and otherwise. So, and they refused to join me. I asked the advice of the judiciary. I asked the Supreme Court justices, the Court of Appeals justices, and the members of the private sector. And all of them told me there's only one man who can proclaim martial law, and that is the President. And you are it. You are the only one who can proclaim martial law. This is why I must carry this particular mark in our history. I could not have transferred it to the legislature. Why? Because the legislature did not have the power. What does the Constitution provide? The President shall be the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the Philippines, and he may order the armed forces out to quell any disorder, riot, rebellion, invasion, insurrection, and in case of invasion, insurrection, rebellion, or imminent danger thereof, when the public safety requires it, he may suspend the privilege of the writ of habeas corpus or proclaim martial law throughout the Philippines or any part thereof. What does that provision provide? It provides that only the President can proclaim martial law. I repeat, that is why I had to assume responsibility. And I am not one for shirking duty. The people said there was necessity for proclaiming martial law. And the people said, you are the only official who can proclaim martial law. So I proclaimed martial law. And I sincerely believed that it was necessary to proclaim martial law to install order and stability because there was complete anarchy throughout the country at the time. Now, therefore, at that particular period, what was the status of our government? Our government was immobilized, impotent. The armed forces could not move out. The industry was not at all in any way moving. There was no income coming into government. Everybody was running away. They burned the U.S. Partly burned the U.S. Embassy, tried to burn it anyway. They tried to kidnap the American ambassador. American ambassador was Byroad, Ambassador Byroad. But whatever it is, they burned the Manila International Airport. They bombed the Supreme Court. They bombed the Constitutional Convention. They bombed the City Hall. They burned part of Malacanang Palace. They attempted to kidnap my children. They attempted to kill the President 8 times. There was, of course, an attempted assassination against the First Lady. You all know about that. What we have asked is this. We want a study. What is it that is necessary in order that we can perform our job? You and I know that if the Philippines is attacked, the United States is not necessarily bound to immediately react because the provision of the Mutual Defense Pact is that you will immediately take steps as is necessary to meet the contingency in accordance with your constitutional processes. What does that mean? That means that you go to the Senate and the House of Representatives. What does that mean? That means delay while we are dying there. 75% of our cities were devastated in the last war. we lost 1 million men. Shall I quote you the statements of Roosevelt and MacArthur that every Carabao will be paid for? Shall I tell you that the veterans who were inducted into the USAF, the United States Armed Forces of the Philippines, of the Far East, your armed forces, were paid only 1/2 the salary of your soldiers? Shall I tell you that we almost turned communists because you refused to recognize us? Shall I tell you that I had a difficult time stopping my guerrillas, 25,000 of them from joining the communists, because precisely you sort of forgot that we had done the fighting for you, you know. And it is not fair to accuse the Philippines of any violation of human rights when there has been no violation. Though if there has been any violation, we punish those who have violated. Do you think that if there was any corruption by the Marcos family, that we can maintain the present prestige and leadership of the Marcoses in the Philippines? What do you think the Filipinos are? They are a very literate people. Literacy in the Philippines has increased up to 90% nationwide, and in Manila it is 100% literacy. It was in the dark, and there were doubts and misgivings. There were fears that you were tiring, you were weary, you doubted your own strength, you didn't know where you were going. But now there is hope. It's still partly in the shadows, but it's trying to emerge. But we have a program which harnesses the energies of those who are half employed, like those who are in the farms. You see, those who wait for the coconuts to fall or who plant rice are partly employed. And so we allow them to engage in what we call small, medium-scale industries, contract work. Where, in what country do you see, say, a boot block? A boot block. Go to a rural bank and say, look, I used to borrow money from this usurious lender here. I borrow 5 pesos in the morning, I have to pay him 6 pesos in the afternoon. Can't you lend me 50 pesos now and I will repay you later on? I have no collateral, I am unknown, I live in the streets. And in what country will you see the rural bank lend this boot block money? After looking at his shoe shine stand and gathering all the other shoe shine boys and putting them to work and getting them to repay this indebtedness, not in a week, but perhaps even in a day. Or fishermen who live a hand-to-mouth existence. Even here, in your prosperous United States, can a poor fisherman go to a bank and borrow money on his name, on his signature? He cannot. But here in the Philippines, he can. A poor fisherman can go to the bank and say, look, I live in so-and-so, and the chairman of my village can certify that I am a poor fisherman. And I would like to organize a group. Can you lend us 5,000 so I can buy a motor, I can buy a net, I can buy a small boat, and we can improve our earnings. And under our laws, we have set aside funds which then are lent out. And we have been able to lend out about 1.2 billion pesos under this scheme, and they have been repaid. They have been repaid, and that's the worst part about it, isn't it? Many people don't believe it. They have been repaid.